Sayers. So, councillors, we will reopen the meeting, and we're going to the second part of public input, and we have three. Dennis Ehrlich, who's in your papers, is not going to be presenting. We have Denny Lendich, who wants to speak, and then we have Steve Dean, who wishes to speak, and then following that is Graham Standring to speak. So we have the three. So I'm going to ask Danny to come up, and Danny, is there anyone with you? Welcome. You have 5 minutes, and then there'll be questions of you. So.
Yes, I've come here today and I've got Bernie, my lawyer, and I want him to speak on my behalf. Here's the full story.
And your other?
Chairman, this is Gary Roberts, who's a support person as well.
Okay, that's
and
fine.
At the end, and in the short time we have, he's going to make a very succinct submission as well as part of that.
Excuse me, Gary is the ex-promoter at Western Springs.
Yep, aware of that. Okay.
Chairman, you want me to stand or sit?
No, sit, please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is on behalf of Mr. Lendich. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. I've written down what I want to say and will speak to you from it as you wish after it has been presented to me by Bernie Allen. In doing that, I will refer to the executive summary paragraph numberings where appropriate. By way of brief introduction, I've been involved in Speedway in New Zealand, USA, Mexico and Australia over many decades, and I've been approached by many people concerned about the removal of Speedway from Western Springs. I've been in business in Auckland and beyond for over 60 years. I have a wide knowledge of Auckland City, having been involved in all manner of civil works and motorway construction. I say this for no reason other than I believe I have something to say that is worth hearing on this issue. I have some questions, and to some I will give answers as I see them. Some are indeed rhetorical. One, who is paying for Speedway to move to Colindale Park? The answer from media and the public record seems to be the ratepayers in large measure. Two, does an approach to council on a suggested move from a present-day commercial Speedway promoter, as per paragraph 3, truly represent what the wider Speedway community of competitors and fans want? The answer from a great majority I talk to is no. Does an MOU to assess feasibility of a move and the outcome that is stated as could move to Colindale Park in paragraph 5 answer the primary question, whether it should move? I think not. Does overseas experience with moving Speedway venues away from city centres give council great confidence that this will not be a white elephant? Just a few examples of failures. Brisbane, Empire Speedway to Archerfield, 60% down. Sydney Showgrounds to Parramatta Showgrounds, 40 paying spectators last Saturday night, I believe. Perth, Claremont to Kwinana. Adelaide, Rowley Park to Speedway City, closed, and now at Murray Bridge on an irregular basis. USA, in California, Ascot Park off 405 freeway to Ventura. Manzanita in Phoenix, Arizona attempted a move but never got off the ground. 5, where is the transparency? My apologies, Mr. Chairman. I'll get the handouts out while I'm speaking. Thank you.
Please continue.
Thank you. 5, where is the transparency in the grant of speedway management rights for the new venue? Where is the plan for an open tender process gone? 6, why does the shift to Collindale Park include a 10-year lease to the current promoter with 2 rights of renewal of 10 years each and a rent period for the first 3 years? This is an extensive lease in comparison to the tenure of the 14 promoters of Speedway from 1929 through to the present, averaging around 4 or 5 years each, and who are listed on the annexure that you have. Presumably the Speedway business is then to be saleable along with the lease assignment, giving 30-year rights in total, which will hold much of the goodwill value. As a commercial transaction, this seems to be highly preferential treatment. 7, can the council tell us the actual cost to it of the move and the value of benefits proposed to be granted to the promoter, including the value of property to be vested in the promoter? 8, can the council identify the promoter and councillors involved in the shift of the Ponsonby Rugby Club to Western Springs in 91-92 and why the racetrack was allowed to be narrowed to accommodate a rugby ground on the infield? This was to the detriment of Speedway, and the infield was never intended or designed for that use and is not a playing field. 9, should the history of the world-renowned Springs as a Speedway venue that overseas drivers and visitors, Aucklanders and other New Zealanders can readily access be continued for as long as reasonably possible? I say yes, absolutely yes. The venue is easily accessible, being opposite on and off motorway ramps and on the main Great North Road arterial route, walkable and bikeable from the city. In addition, there are many benefits to local businesses within the area on Speedway days and nights. My recommendations would be that Speedway remain at Western Springs, and with no disrespect to the great club that it is, the Ponsonby Rugby Club be relocated to more appropriate premises that would serve it much better than their present ones, occupied since 91. Secondly, resolve the existing environmental issues, e.g. noise, dust. I understand there has not been a noise complaint for 7 years, and the dust is easily resolvable. Noise is not in fact a problem. Council approve 14 nights per year with rain dates. The track be returned to a quarter-mile dirt racing track instead of being impeded by a rugby field, which alters the dimensions of the track, which in turn affects the quality of the racing and increases the danger for the drivers. That the club rooms be returned to the management of the appropriate Speedway Association. From talking with various previous promoters, car owners and fans, a 14-night period seems the right amount of nights to run a successful season, will make it financially viable for car owners to run their cars and make it enjoyable for a family night out of fun and excitement. Any more than this becomes unviable and the car count and fan count will drop. In closing, I table that I have no interest in being a promoter and have only the greater interest that Western Springs remain the home of Speedway, and that the ratepayers of Auckland are not subjected to this outrageous expenditure on a new Speedway stadium and perhaps a white elephant like Eden Park, when we already have one that exists, has been there for nearly 90 years and works well when not subject to rugby field constraints. It seems to me that plans are quite advanced under the MROU, but my plea, for the reasons above, is to stop, stand back, do further due diligence, and to engage in a process that has integrity and transparency. I'm going to ask Mr. Roberts now to read his submission, running on from this, following which either of these gentlemen are open to questions on the submissions.
Just need to clarify here, because and I'm willing to be very flexible. There was actually only the request from Denny. It wasn't a request from Gary to submit. So Gary, you would be submitting on behalf of who?
On behalf of
Mr. Chairman,
Speedway.
I did clarify it, that he would be speaking as part of our team in support before presenting, but I'm in your hands.
Okay, well, you've got 5 minutes to present. We're at 8 minutes, but I'm going to be flexible. Please, Gary, go ahead.
Thank you.
Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gary Roberts. I was a co-promoter for Speedway Track Promotions Limited from the years of 1970 to 1988, 18 years. I'm here because I still have a great passion for the sport, and I want to make sure that it does go in the right direction for the future. After 90 years of Speedway at Western Springs, and for our sport not to operate at this magnificent venue would be the biggest setback in the history of Speedway in New Zealand. I firmly believe that due diligence with Auckland Council and promotion, there is the ability to set stringent conditions that would allow Speedway to remain at Western Springs to the advantage of all. Speedway cannot afford to be put in a position where there is not a democratic tender process in place. Promoters of Speedway have a duty of care to the sport, but they don't and should not have the right to own it outright. The tender process is the only protection long-term for the future of Speedway in Auckland. For the life of me, I cannot see how a new stadium in South Auckland could be a financial success to the council or foreseeable promoters and competitors. As for ratepayers subsidising a new venue, this leaves me speechless. If that's the best we can do with ratepayers' money, I think we all need to take a very hard look at ourselves. Western Springs Stadium is the jewel in the crown as far as amphitheatre stadiums go in New Zealand. I firmly believe it requires being promoted at a level the revamped stadium deserves for 2018 and the future. In the absence of value, people default the cost. Thank you very much. If there's any questions from the floor, I'll try and answer them. Please introduce yourself if you want me to reply.
Denny, is there anything you would like to say? No?
Yeah, what I would like to say, we've already heard it, I've raced all around the world. I've seen tracks open and I've seen them closed. Any business that requires people, you don't go to a place where there's no people. I know with our Wendy's hamburger chain, we have properties around New Zealand. We won't build there because the democratics doesn't allow us to do it. All I want to say is that if you go to Collindale Park and have a look out there, there's just nothing. Ratepayers' money to go out there. The place has to be put up for tender. As far as Western Springs is concerned, there's no problem with dust and there's no problem with noise. I'm a noise expert and I'm a dust expert. I built Auckland City. We're not allowed to have dust or noise. So I know how to control that. My concern is, I'm a kidney transplant patient. I spend a lot of time in the Auckland hospital. The Auckland City Council will be better off to put some money into the hospital. You need to take a trip up there and have a look. Is there anybody here that wants to challenge me on anything I've just said? I'll turn around and I'll ask these people here. Want to challenge me? I don't want anybody shooting me in the back when I've gone out of here. I want to stand up and challenge me. Any questions to me?
Councillor Sayers.
Oh, first off the rank, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Roberts, for your comments around that tender process. I think that I won't have any questions for you because I think you've made that very clear, and also your presentation has been very clear about the use of ratepayers' money and your concerns around that. But my questions, I do have two. Danny, you just talked about the two questions. I'll put them both to you. The first one, you just mentioned about how you can control noise and you can control dust. I wonder if you could elaborate on what you mean by that. That'd be the first question.
What I should have done is I should have bought a muffler. When we went to Perth and raced in Perth in Claremont Speedway, the promoters gave us a muffler. And it was square like that. And the noise came in here and it came out the opposite end and it went up and down, up and down. I still have the muffler. The only disadvantage is that it does lose power. But if everybody's got the same muffler, it doesn't matter. Noise, dust. The only way you can control dust, you don't pour water on it. What you do is you get a water cart and you have very fine nozzles and you force the water out. I have them in my yard right now. I have 4 out at West Auckland which we wash down and we wash our trucks down. And you force it through there and it throws, at the end of it, it throws a mist. So you throw that up in the air at the back of the water cart and it comes down like fog. And you can go out, as soon as the first race out, you can go out there and mist it. You don't do what they do and the cars slip and slide.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else got any more questions?
So the second question was picking up on the point that was being made about Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, the USA, about these speedways that have moved. I think one you said 60% down, one's closed in Adelaide.
Yes.
The common theme seems to be moving from an urban area to a suburb. Would you like to elaborate on that? That's the impression that I think you've just given us. What's the common theme there that we should learn from?
You have to have the people in the area. So if they move the speedway out of the area, there's no people out there. At Western Springs and other stadiums, like Sydney Showgrounds, you could walk out of Sydney. Now I rang a guy last night in Sydney and I asked him, how's the crowds? It's a long way out of Sydney. I spent a lot of time in Sydney, I have a sister there. So I went there, they couldn't afford to turn the lights on. That's how bad it is. They skimped on lighting. The crowd was down to 40 paying public people last Saturday night. So they're making the car owners pay, they're making the drivers pay, they're making everybody pay to make it stack up, and it's a joke.
And I take it from
That's that place.
And that's, I'll finish off, Ross, just with the closing. So you're sending us a warning that that's what you, in your opinion, will happen if this.
That's a fact. It's not my opinion. It's a fact.
Thank you.
These are facts. That's why I want someone here to challenge me. I raced in Rowley Park years ago in Adelaide. They shifted to Speedway Park or whatever it was. Closed. Finished. Nobody there.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lendich, you run a construction company, so you're putting the challenge out to us that there should be a competitive tender process. Are you familiar with Auckland Council's tender processes?
We get 20% of the jobs we tender for. 20%. I feel grateful for getting that. So we tender for everything.
Okay.
Every job we've done in Auckland City in the last 50 years, we've had to tender for.
The second question I had for you is, could you put an amount on the amount you have personally spent on Speedway over the years?
Right now, I've got somewhere between $3.5 and $4 million invested. I've got investments in Australia, I've got investments in America. I would have spent, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I know I've spent a lot of money.
And the third question I've got, following on from your submission, is you seem to be very concerned that we could be potentially exposing ratepayers for the future with this if we don't get it right. You're a ratepayer in Auckland Council?
My family is probably, as a family, one of the biggest ratepayers. We've got a staff of 500 and we own the Wendy's chain, and we've got property in Auckland. and we pay a lot of rates. We're currently out, head office is out West Auckland for my construction company. With a council issue there right at the moment where the council's owned everything for housing. So our rates are astronomical. Our side of the road is residential. Across the other side is commercial. So we are a very big rate payer. I'd
And-
like to see a family that's paying as much rates as what we are.
I guess my final question to you from your long experience of Speedway is which areas of Auckland is it most popular in? Is it the west, is it the south, is it the north, is it,
A lot of people come out from the West Auckland, quite a few people come from the North Shore, there's a few people that come from South Auckland. But generally, locally, a lot of people from Grey Lynn. You see a lot of people walking there.
Thank you.
What come from overseas too much.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Councillor Fletcher asked my question, which was around where the people came, because that goes to viability. So I'm happy with that answer, Danny. Thank you.
You don't have another question,
No, not at this stage.
Councillor Stewart.
I think you said that you actually use your own money to promote a lot of the drivers. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, what was happening, this gentleman and his two partners were paying to bring the best driver in the world
Yes.
to New Zealand. They paid me to use the car. They paid him win, lose or draw. And the promoters paid me and I gave him that money. He was that good. A personal friend of mine now. Today, these guys don't want to pay nothing. The last American guy I had to bring down and pay for everything.
So do you think that if it moved from Western Springs, that people like you, who are not drivers, but promote and pay the drivers to drive for the love of the sport, would probably not perhaps want to promote the sport?
What will happen if we shift out of there? The crowds will go down. They can't afford to pay. They'll make the car owners and drivers pay for everything.
So do you think there
And
hasn't
they
been
don't want, they've lowered the prize money for the midget section, I believe, $1,600 a week, a meeting. I can't guarantee that, I've been told that. They're just taking and wanting the rate payer to pay. It's got to stop.
It's very concerning. Thank you.
Yeah, while I'm here, if there's anybody here that wants to challenge me on those numbers, stand up and challenge me. Got anybody from Speedway Track Promotions here?
Thank you, Mr Lendich. Sorry, you are here to present to the councillors and therefore the questions are...
I would like to say one more thing. I was at the Warriors game last year. My family sponsors the Warriors and I saw Phil Goff there. And I said to Phil, if you don't support us and stay at Western Springs, what? Yeah, I know he's here. That's why I'm telling him, reminding him. If you don't support us at Western Springs, you won't be the mayor. It's not only the open wheel races, it's all the other races that go to the track. He says, I support it. So I just told him when we come in, I hope you still haven't changed your mind.
I haven't changed my mind, but it's not quite as you remember it.
Councillor Newman.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I was out of the room just as you're studying your presentation before. Can you give me a sense of what would the interest be in the market if this was subject to a competitive tender?
There are people out there, but we can't leave it to the last minute. There are other promoters out there. There are promoters that used to promote, I believe, are interested. It's like everything, you can't leave it to the last minute.
Can I ask a
It's got to
follow-up?
be advertised that it will be coming out for tender, whether the present promoters get it or not. It's not the point. But as long as the people know it's coming out for tender.
Do you think that under those circumstances there might be an opportunity for co-location of different motorsports in a location, or does it have to be exclusive?
What were you trying to say? I can't hear.
Do you think that if it was subject to a open and competitive tender, that there would be an opportunity for possible co-location, or is it a requirement that it be exclusive, one promoter at a venue?
Are you saying would it affect the tender process if it went somewhere else, out of Western Springs? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not sure if it's possible for me to elaborate further, to be
Speak
honest.
Speak louder, Danny.
I'm a
Say it
little bit
louder.
deaf, that's
He's
all.
struggling to hear you.
Okay,
Could you just define co-location? It might be helpful.
well, look, if you had a venue and you had multiple categories of motorsports, if that was technically possible, would that be something that would still be attractive to?
Technically not possible.
Not possible.
You've got open wheel, which is what I taught them, showed them. You can't run open wheel race car on a stock car track
Okay,
because of the location of the safety fence. They've killed many people through running it on a track that is a stock car track. A stock car track, the fence is set back here. On an open wheel track, Indianapolis 500, good example, the fence is here and the track is there.
oh, yep,
They hit the fence, they fall back down. If it's over here, they roll along the concrete, blow the roll cage off and kill the driver.
okay, thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, my concern is around the tender process, and if we were to stop and open it up in a transparent and open way, how much time, I mean, I'm not sure what this is required, maybe it's an officer question, but you've been involved in tenders for a long time in your trade. What would be the time needed to open and have a decent amount of time and to close that tender process?
It's people have to know that it will come out for tender. Right now we've got a situation nobody knows what's going to happen. Just going to roll on and roll on and roll on. It used to be 3 years by 3 years by 3 years. I think these gentlemen here had it on those basis. And it was a known fact, oh yeah, 3 years are up. So I guess if you're going to put it out for tender, or let the people know that it'll be going out for tender, it's good to have at least a couple of years, 18 months. It should be written in the contract. Once your contract is up, it will be coming up for tender, then everybody knows.
Okay, my second question, Mr. Chair, is that I've heard that basically the people who come and watch Speedway at Western Springs come more or less from a local catchment area. Can you tell me, do they arrive by car or public transport in the main?
A lot of them arrive by car, a lot of them, some people that can afford, that live locally come by taxi because of the traffic. But a lot of them come by cars, and that's another thing. We park all the cars in the car park, and I think it's $5 a car. So they're making as much money out of the car park as what they are out of the show.
So you quite rightly identified that there aren't too many people living at Collindale. Do you think because they arrive by car to Western Springs anyway, that they would just keep driving down the motorway to Collindale?
You know what the cost of gas is?
Yes, I...
Ask yourself.
Okay.
Listen to Mike Hosking's show every morning, and he'll tell you how many people are complaining what it costs you to go to work. They want a pay increase from the boss.
Right. You're saying that fuel is one of the reasons that would prohibit them driving further?
It's a long way to go. It's a long way to come home. I've got friends that live way out at West Auckland in the Waitakaris. Got relations that live out there. take hours to go out there. And slow. What about the congestion? You people, if you ever travel overseas, how early do you have to go to catch the flight? Can you imagine on a Saturday morning they've got people with cars going in the same direction? They're all grizzling like hell parked in the motorway, burning up gas and sitting on the motorways, and onto the government about the motorways. It's got the same thing would happen out at Collindale Park. There's nowhere more central than Western Springs. It's the perfect location.
It's one of the most famous in the world, Denny.
It's world renowned.
Around the world.
England, everywhere. Bike riders, we've had the best bike riders in the world at Western Springs. And we've produced many world champions.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
So, Councillor Walker.
One very quick question, Danny, and it goes to the Western Springs brand. You've got a bit of experience in brands, Wendy's, for example. What price do you put on a brand like that, Western Springs Speedway?
Like I said, the brand is the thing. If you gave anybody 10 by 10 by 10 and gave the present promoters that, Bill Buckley would be dead and gone. He's older than me. And all they'd be selling is the ticket that they had at Western Springs. So how good is the brand? They've got nothing else to sell but Western Springs. It's world renowned. Ellis Park in South Africa. You talk rugby? You know where Ellis Park is, you guys?
Yep.
Well, you talk to anybody in the world. Where's Western Springs? They say Speedway.
All Blacks got beaten there in 1960.
All right.
You remember that very easily.
Questions?
True.
Any further questions? I'm desperately trying to retrieve a newspaper article of a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Lendich.
Is this a question?
Yes, yes.
Gonna get there.
Only just...
I've got one more question.
Okay. Councillor Newman, go ahead, please.
Mr. Lendich, do you feel that, were you pressured not to appear here today?
Sorry, what did you say?
Speak up.
Pressured not to appear. You pressured not to appear.
No.
Do you, in the presentation of the information that you've presented, have you had an opportunity at any stage to present the options that you've suggested to Regional Facilities Auckland, who are the custodians?
Not really, no.
Okay.
I haven't been pressurised to come. I've just come to say my piece.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll probably talk here all day.
So in the article the other day, still Steve Kilgillen, you indicated that, you know, whilst Western Springs your preference, but that Collindale was actually okay. Is that true? Have you been reported correctly? I mean, it seems to be the article was inferring that it's maybe the lack of competition for the tender or expressions of interest is your primary issue, and of course naturally you want to stay at Western Springs, but Collindale could be okay as a motor sport precinct. Could Bernie or Denny could just clarify that?
Let them pay for it.
Have you been out to Collindale?
Yeah.
Well, if someone gave an empty paddock like that, it wouldn't bring you on to want a tender to put something out there.
Yeah, so you didn't say Collindale, you didn't say in the paper that Collindale was okay?
No.
Okay.
No.
Right.
It's got absolutely nothing going for it. Now, if anybody here thinks it has, stand up.
I'll stand up because there's a few good things about it.
Nothing. Yeah, what have you got to say about it?
It's a great place for equestrian.
Anyway, Any further questions, Mr. Lindich? No? Right, thank you very much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, and we will move a resolution to thank Danny and Bernie and Gary, Member Tartary, seconded by Councillor Cooper. All those in favour?
Aye.
Okay, right, Steve. Is Steve here? Steve Dean. Welcome, Steve. Steve, we're just not quite sure whether this is a personal submission or are you representing anyone or both?
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak here today, and councillors. I'll clarify that now. So my name's Steve Dean. I'm a public relations consultant who specialises in sports. I speak here today for many concerned Speedway stakeholders who ask that any decision on voting for the future of Speedway in Auckland is deferred until further investigation is complete into matters I'm about to raise here. These people aren't here to speak for themselves today, evidently. They fear repercussions from powerful figures in Speedway should they be publicly identified. These people have good cause for this fear. Some have been verbally threatened and a number of businesses and interests could be jeopardised. I submit that situation alone should be reason for significant concern, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. First, I will just run through the submission of the people I represent here today. So, on behalf of this active and growing group of people, I present the following representation. The future viability of Speedway at Collindale Park appears questionable given the intention of a number of drivers and sponsors and supporters to quit following a shift to that venue. There are currently 18 of 22 Speedway tracks in New Zealand who run both stock car and other categories with traditional midgets and sprint cars, yet Springs Promotions Limited, SPL, appear to have presented documentation to the contrary. Auckland Council appear to have been misled by Springs Promotions Limited in an effort to gain monopolistic control of Speedway racing in Auckland. SPL appear to have misrepresented information from Speedway New Zealand, which was presented to Auckland Council and RFA. For the past 12 months, there has been a negative publicity campaign directed to Auckland Council by SPL, yet this company is willing now to accept millions of dollars to relocate to a venue that is devoid of public transport in the direct flight path of Auckland International Airport and has to be built from scratch. If this proposal at Collindale is not successful and the promoters walk away, Auckland ratepayers will be left with a multi-million-dollar investment. I think I saw recently that figure has gone up quite substantially in recent weeks, in a facility that is practically worthless as the promoter is not required to provide a financial guarantee. Waikaraka Park is a complementary venue to Speedway at Western Springs, and it appears this has not been explored as an option fully. And now to go to my opening remarks, the concerns about the monopolistic behaviour of SPL and the 30-year licence. Drivers have been intimidated by Springs Promotions Limited and or Greg Mosen, and Speedway supporters have been intimidated, volunteers have been intimidated, and some have lost their positions at Western Springs as a result. Now, I do have with me today correspondence in the form of emails supporting these claims. I've had a good read through them, and I've decided I'm not prepared to submit them today for the record due to reasons I've already mentioned. In particular, the circle of knowledge with some of these complaints would be particularly small, so if they became debated, it would be very easily to identify the people who this correspondence relates to. So I don't think we could protect their identity sufficiently in that. To give you an example of what some of these emails contain, there's an example of someone who's invested $300,000 in Speedway cars and equipment, who now feels they've been blackballed and can't compete in the sport, and that's just one example. That would be quite an issue, I would suggest. So again, to submit, the people I represent say no vote for the future of Speedway in Auckland should be taken until the matters raised here have been fully investigated. That raises the issue of how they can be fully investigated if people are too afraid to speak out and be identified in what should be an open and public, transparent process. So I submit that in order to protect the safety of the people wishing to provide information to Auckland Council, a whistleblowing facility is required that is independent of Regional Facilities Auckland. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. One thing that's quite interesting is both Bill Buckley and Danny Lennox, who clearly a couple of old salts who've been around the traps a long time, are both equally adamant that stock cars and open wheel don't mix. Yet you say that they do. Supposedly, we know stock cars of Wakaraka says that's okay too, but we're getting some conflicting advice there.
Yeah,
Could
look,
you explain that?
I'll try to. I'm not a speedway expert by any sense, but midget cars and sprint cars I don't think are different classes, particularly in that sense. Open wheel racing, the example that was given before was IndyCar racing, which is single seat vehicles driving very fast around a paved track. Midget cars and sprint cars tend to ride on the same surface. I think from my limited knowledge of speedway, you would have to check that out. There will be clashes between classes of vehicles, I imagine, but I'm not an expert. I can't really clarify that for you.
Okay. My second question, because obviously you have an interest, and I think you edit a magazine relating to motorsports, do you, or not? Or is it?
No, that's not the case.
Oh, okay. So, obviously with Colin Dean, the activation of Collindale Park, as we're trying to, and it's been a long-standing thing from Manukau City Council previously. I think it goes back to 2003, and the new city has picked it up as being the destination place for motorsports outside Pukekohe and outside, what's by Patiki Road. You don't see that as being a good thing that we're attempting to do, which is to bring everyone together into an environment which people can cohabit and coordinate together?
Look, with respect, my views on that aren't really relevant. I'm here to represent a group of people who can't be here today. They are the sort of people you should be putting that question to. Unfortunately, they don't feel comfortable being here today due to threats they have received to their reputation and to their business interests. What I would say to that is that my background is actually in investigative journalism, and I'm well accustomed to receiving information that contains claims of various natures and filtering through that information and trying to test its veracity. There is information here that I believe would be of concern to Council should it be proved to be true. They are only accusations at this stage and claims. They haven't been tested, but I believe Council needs to have a process where that information can be tested.
Yes, it's a bit hard that we can't ask you a question when you can't answer it because you haven't got the permission for anyone here and they're not here.
That is exactly the point.
It's a little bit awkward, and I'm certainly aware of, I think we've interacted in the past, Steve, with your journalism. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Got a question for you, and it goes to, I guess, the lack of a business case that we've got. So you've got people that are communicating to you, and I guess these are drivers, sponsors, fans. Can you give us any idea of the number of people that might want to communicate with Council if there were some form of non-disclosure?
I don't know the exact number, but they describe that themselves as a growing number. It's at least half a dozen because they have half a dozen submissions, but I believe they were gathered at fairly short notice when this group decided to go down this path and engage me to come here today. They say there are many, many more people who would engage in the process should sufficient protections be in place. I note that the previous speaker, Danny, didn't have any problems coming here today, didn't feel at all intimidated and hadn't been coerced not to by his own statements. Danny's obviously a fairly powerful individual. He has significant business interests and he's not likely to be cowed by people. I believe the people I represent aren't that same class of person. They are small-time speedway enthusiasts who have some, well, there'll be a range of them, but some of them have relatively modest roles in the speedway community, and they would feel intimidated by power. And there is a significant power play going on here, in my opinion, from one particular promoter who stands to receive a 30-year lease to a heavily funded public facility. I would submit that those people have good cause to be concerned. They have detailed here what has happened to them, their experiences, and it does raise a concern with me personally.
So councillors, I just remind you to be careful on the laws of slander, so let's be careful. Councillor Goff, Mayor Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm concerned about the comments that you've made about the allegations that exist in this area. This is Auckland, it's not Chicago. You have mentioned threats and people feeling fearful for their safety. That implies to me criminal behaviour. I wonder if you have encouraged any of these people who've made those allegations to you to take those allegations to the police where criminal behaviour is properly dealt with.
I believe we should clarify the term safety. I don't think it's a physical safety issue. I think it's more threats to potentially business interests and reputation. So when I say they don't feel safe to attend, means they feel there will be repercussions to their lives and their business interests. It's not Chicago. No, there's no. I don't believe there are any physical threats that have been tabled. It is simply, I would say, threats to blackball people, and these are only allegations. Threats to blackball them and to do their business interests harm.
Yeah. The problem with raising allegations of that nature, you've left us with a clear impression about where that threatening behaviour is coming from, but you've given us no evidence. So we see damage to the character of the person that you're making the allegations against, but without evidence to back it up. And that puts us in a very difficult position, and even more so because this debate is now public. I don't think that is appropriate. I think that you need to provide this committee or other authorities with evidence of the behaviour that's being alleged. It does come close to defamation. One defence to defamation is the truth, but none of us around this table have any idea whether there is any truth to those allegations, and I don't think that's acceptable.
Councillor Walker, thank you very much. Would you please let the Mayor finish?
I have finished. I'm inviting Steve, if he has that evidence, to present that evidence, because otherwise the allegation hangs in the air.
I think that's exactly what we're here to discuss, it seems, is that there needs to be a process for these people to be heard in a way they feel protected, to express their views. And that is the request that's on the table. The council finds a way of doing that.
Well, I'm sorry, that doesn't take us forward. It just creates an allegation, the truth of which we are not able to establish. And that's the difficulty.
In fairness, Mr. Mayor, I am not able to establish the truth of that allegation either. What I have is multiple people claiming a pattern of behaviour that they're not comfortable with. I've assessed that information and I believe it should be presented to council. That's what I'm here to do. I do take your point around defamation law, but I have presented the case. It will be up to council to determine what to do with that information.
Well, we haven't got the information. That's the problem, isn't it?
No,
so, look, I'm going to draw it to a close here. Is there anyone who's got a question? And I'm just saying, please be careful regards defamation, slander. No. If we've got a presenter that is close to the bone on that, let the presenter do it. Please don't participate as a councillor. Councillor Lee.
Are you aware of correspondence from a council manager to one of the key parties alleging misbehaviour of the type you're talking about?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions of Steve? No? Okay. Would someone like to move to thank Steve, and thank you, Stephen, for coming and representing people.
Thank you for your time.
Do we have a mover, please? Councillor Simpson, seconded by Councillor Cashmore, Deputy Mayor Cashmore. All those in favour?
No.
No, not Councillor. Okay. Okay, I will second. I will second.
I'll second it.
We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Right, we will now have Graham Standring. Welcome, Graham. And again, Graham, if you could just introduce who you're representing, or is it a personal submission?
Thank you.
You can sit down, you don't need to stand up.
I'm used to standing. I'm quite one of those sort of people that's
Okay, that's
set
right.
to go. So if I sit down, I'm worn out there. So I'll start and then I'll get excited later. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity. I'm not representing any people as such. I just have an opinion about the move from Collindale Park. But I'd just like to outline my background in the sport. I attended Speedway for about 57 years. I raced for 30 years in New Zealand, Australia and the USA. I'm recognised as one of 3 drivers that have won over 100 feature races in New Zealand and internationally. I've been inducted into the Speedway Hall of Fame, but since retiring I've become a reporter for the Speedway and the technical side of things and outlining to the public in simple terms some of the slang or some of the things that we talk about and make it so it's much more enjoyable. For the last 5 years I have been the rookie driver mentor, meaning that new drivers that come to the Speedway, I mentor them through the process of getting them introduced into the sport. The last 3 years I've been on the drivers committee for open wheel races in Auckland, and I'm currently the president of the midget car or open wheel drivers society. So I approve of the move to Collindale Park. The level of racing, in my opinion, and again I reiterate this is my opinion, has developed over the last few years where the track at Western Springs as it is at the moment is not safe to race on. I believe that the move to Collindale Park, giving us a wider track and a bank track, etc., would be more beneficial to the sport of Speedway. And I speak from the competitor's point of view, where I get questioned all the time about, you know, the move to Collindale Park, how much better it'll be, etc. All competitors, in my opinion, have had their say. We've had meetings with the promotion at Western Springs. We've had, they've all been invited, and everything that I read on, once I'd applied to do this talk, I read the thing about it, and it's all been tabled as per it's been on your website. So I think that the situation of that has been very transparent about the move to Collindale Park, about the reasons for the move, etc., etc. The thing was that at one of the meetings, the drivers were asked questions about moving, and a lot of guys sat on their hands, and a lot of guys didn't know what to do. And the guys that stood up said, yeah, they'd like to consider the move. And once that was tabled, the enthusiasm and the questions that followed that were really quite paramount as to that the enthusiasm is there to get out of Western Springs, not because of the facility, but because of the condition of the racing situation. I move now on to open wheel racing versus stock car racing and the Waikaraka, and why, in my opinion, it cannot merge. The cars that we now have been developed over the course of years, and they're so intricate and they're so good now that they've really, the gap has widened between the two sanctions, the stock cars fraternity and the open wheel racing, and each of those two divisions requires quite a different track. The stock cars require a flat, narrow track so that they can make contact and provide their type of racing. And in speedway cars, open wheel cars, they require a bank track that needs to be wider and marginally longer than it is at Western Springs for the racing to be really good. And I believe that when the racing is really good, the people will come and watch it. So that sort of covers off the difference between the two of them. Wait a sec. Yep, here we go. My biggest concern, now I've raced, and I absolutely love racing at Western Springs. I love racing at all tracks around the world. But since I took a role as observing, let's say, and watching what went on and doing the whole making excuses for the situation, I really came across the logistics situation of Western Springs versus Collindale Park. Having understood that in the olden days they used to tow the cars to the speedway and race them, then further into the tenure they bought cars on trailers and they unloaded them and they raced them at Western Springs, etc., etc. Guys are travelling from all around the country to come to Western Springs, and they're bringing B trains, they're bringing semi-haulers, and they're bringing huge trailers now, and the logistics of getting them in and out of the stadium, when on a Saturday evening they have to be there at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and they've got to drive these things right through the city, right through the motorway structure in the city, it becomes an issue, as well as loading up at the end of the night and getting them back out to where they come from. I believe that at Collindale Park, the fact that it's on the same motorway as Western Springs virtually, that it's not hours down the road, and etc., etc. I believe that it's on the same motorway, and the logistics of getting in and out of there with a facility that we have an opportunity to design ourselves. We're not moving into something that is been there for a very long time. I know 89 years, but here's a chance for a clean sheet, and we can make this work with the right application. And if the racing's good, the people will come. It's the only reason that they won't go to watch the racing is because, in my opinion, the racing's not so good. Now I want to put my mentor's hat on, and the mentor hat is a guy, any one of you people could go out and buy a $100,000 race car that's really quite sophisticated, very high horsepower, and really quite lethal in the wrong hands. And to go and race them at Western Springs, in essence, if I can put it into rugby terms, you'd be like buying a pair of rugby boots and then joining the back of the All Blacks pack. It's not fair on yourself as a rookie, and it's not fair on the competitors that race at Western Springs to have to contend with these guys that are forced into the situation due to the lack of a practice facility or somewhere where they can race more frequently to get more experience to bring them up to speed. I'm going pretty good so far, so bear with me. If I've been more than 5 minutes, I apologise. But
you're doing well, and I'm going to give you extra time because others have had extra time.
Okay, thank you. The issue on transparency of the thing, as the president of the Open Wheel Drivers Club, we have a representative from each section, which is the TQ midgets, the quarter midgets, the sprint cars and the midget cars, all prominent drivers or people that have been in the sport for a very long time. When we come to talk at these meetings, we meet with the promotion and we discuss things. They ask for longer races, more races in the evening, etc., etc. But one of the things that usually gets tabled is the move to Collindale Park. And in that is an absolute excitement for the potential of being able to get, at last, something that they really, really want. They've all got visions of tracks, and Denny himself has mentioned a racetrack in Lincoln, Nebraska, where the racing's great because the turn's banked, etc., etc. We've all got an image in our mind, and I certainly have, of tracks that I've raced on overseas that would be far more suitable for the type of racing that Speedway, a section of cars at Western Springs, has evolved to. Finally, we talk about the history. We talk about the history of Western Springs, and yes, it's a fantastic place and it's a great history, but believe me, if any of you people tried to go and find some history on Western Springs, or try and find, for instance, take your children, or in my case, children or grandchildren, to show them something that I achieved at Western Springs, there's no history at Western Springs. The history lives in our minds. The history lives in what we've seen, what we remember, and stories that we've been told. There's no timeline for the Speedway at Western Springs, and it's been there 89 years. The history is in our minds. There's nothing. If I want to tell somebody about a guy that raced so often, won so many races in a row, that they actually put a $1,000 bounty on that person to beat him in the next race, how can I prove that? The only way I can prove it is to tell them that person was me. So what I say is that I believe that Speedway, as much as we love Western Springs, Speedway needs to expand, and liken it to going running with two smaller pair of shoes. The time has come for the sport to expand and grow, and I believe that moving to Collindale Park would cover that off. Thank you.
Very interesting. Okay. I suppose I'll ask a question which does get to the heart of what is of concern to many of us is who would own the entity out at Collindale, which may well not be SBL, by the way. I mean, what do the drivers think of some sort of entity that would be a trust or whatever, that then itself has some rules for whatever, how it's going to be tendered or whether it's locked in or whatever?
The only conversations I've had with the drivers is the enthusiasm to move to a better facility. I can't answer on that, but in my own opinion, that I would think that if the council's putting in X amount of dollars and the current promoters are stumping up with a lot of money, then they would need to have a longer term of time at Collindale Park to reap the return of their investment.
Yep, good answer. Thank you. Merkoff.
Thank you very much, Graham, and thank you for the unique insight that you've given us. I've got some great comments down there from you that most of us, wouldn't have had the ability to see without your comments. The challenge that we've got as members of the governing body is, we've got different groups of people here saying quite different things, both quite sincerely, I think, and we've got to try and make a bit of a judgment as to, what does the average driver think? What does the average fan think? You've had a lot to do with the drivers. How is there any way in which we can measure the extent to which your views, expressed quite enthusiastically here, represent the majority, or, for example, Denny's views represent the majority? How would we make that assessment?
That's a good question. I can only... I've raced with Denny. Denny's my car owner. We're very, very good friends, so it's a bit awkward because we're on either sides of the fence at this stage. But I've only conversed with the drivers and can only tell you about their enthusiasm for it, and that is in the main the bulk of the drivers. I've not had any conversation with any driver that said, I don't want to move out of Western Springs based on the track facility, etc., etc. They've all got a soft place in their heart for it, just like probably the league players have with Carlaw Park, rugby players with the park in Wellington, that they had to leave. All those reasons we've got there, but they're all our memories. But the drivers that I've spoken to, and that's the bulk of them, and even last Saturday night I'm walking around with a microphone trying to do my best and appease the situation. The track wasn't great, and I'm getting hammered about, man, the sooner we get out of here to go to a purpose-built facility, the better.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Councillor Cashman.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Graham, you're in the Hall of Fame, so you can probably answer the question for us. Stock cars versus Speedway, they're two different tracks. You said stock cars is flat, Speedway's cambered. Can they run on the same track?
We run once a year at Waikareka Park, probably to boost the numbers of the meetings in the Auckland area, but not successfully. No, they cannot race in there, in my opinion, because both classes have evolved to a situation where they've really quite isolated themselves to get the best out of their cars, and to get the best out of their cars, they've moved further away from each other. So they are two quite separate entities, and the tracks that they require to race on are quite different. Of course, they can go to either facility and race there, but not ideally. Ideally, they need their own facility, and they definitely, so far as safety, etc., that's in the hands of Speedway New Zealand. They would control the safety issues with that, but I don't think, to answer your question, no, in my opinion, they cannot be at the same track.
Okay, thanks. My second question, if I could, Mr Chair, very briefly, is there is a migration between kids on carts. I see the Mount Wellington Kart Club that is going to potentially Collindale and so forth. Is there a migration through the ages to stock, to speedways, and to other forms of racing?
Yes, there is. And that's a very good question also. I can tell you that Shane van Gisbergen started racing at Western Springs in quarter midgets, then developed into TQs, and now he's who he is as that. So that's a good. There's a pathway through dirt track racing to go from midget cars to sprint cars, etc. We've had successful New Zealand New Zealand midget car drivers do very well in the United States. Both Barry Butterworth, myself, Michael Pickens, 3 drivers that have won feature races in the United States. So there is a pathway, but the pathway was cut when the race cars in America went from dirt to asphalt, and they went from front engines to rear engines. And so that really cut that transition, it cut that pathway. But yes, there is a progression path for guys in New Zealand and Australia to come through Speedway and go on to further things here.
Thank you, Graham.
Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your... Over here.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. I've a few questions. So some of the, looking through the report, this was signalled Speedway potentially moving to Colindale 15 years ago. So, and I personally kind of get confused of all the politics and all the things behind all these different decisions on stadiums and all the kind of history. But one of the big things that kept coming up was that you're limited there with nights. So 12 is talking to the drivers, is that a big... Do you think you're going to be able to fulfil those nights? So we've got 12 at the moment, you're allowed to, but a move would potentially give you 30 or more nights.
Yep, that's a great question. You did right. The cars are more expensive to run now, and they are more expensive to repair, and the maintenance level of them is high, and so the cost of running a car is much more expensive, so they possibly can't run as many as 30 shows a year. But bear in mind now, we run 12 at Western Springs, probably 3 or 4 at Tauranga, probably 4 at Huntly or 5 at Huntly. So all of a sudden we're up to 22 meetings. So yes, they can go to Colindale Park and run more meetings at Colindale Park. Plus, if they're given the opportunity to have practices, it would make the integration of new guys into the sport more safe, and also it would be just better for the sport.
That's your time up.
That'd be better for the sport. So yeah, the cost of running the cars for a longer term through the Auckland period would probably be more beneficial, rather than them having to travel to accumulate the extra meetings that they're required to do for, say, sponsorship commitments.
Okay, and so I didn't realise that. Are you saying you can't train at Western Springs?
Yes, that's right. We cannot do that, and sometimes we're limited to 12 meetings a year with, I think, only 4 or perhaps 5 rainouts a year. If one of those nights that is chosen on, I think it's in June, they choose the night that they're going to have a rainout, and so if one of those nights doesn't fall on a rainout night and it rains out, then we've lost that meeting, so we're down to 11 at that stage. But there's no opportunity to test or to test the cars, make them more safe, or for the drivers to get more experience at Western Springs other than to enter into races.
Okay. And obviously we're having to go on trust that you're representing some voices of the drivers, but so you feel like this has been well discussed with those drivers in the room, and there is support from drivers to move, or, I mean, we have to take your word for it.
Yes, I would back that 100%. Yes, that I have the bulk of the drivers. I don't have their support. I'm not voted forward by them. This is again my own opinion, but in the conversations that I've had and the meetings that I've been to, and that's all of them, the driver support seems to be pro moving to Colindale Park to be able to base a facility that is specifically for open wheel racing, that would give the public the best view of what they're capable of. And once that takes place, and I know about location, I know very well about location, I'm a business owner myself, and so I'm very aware of location, but my belief is that once the racing improves, the excitement continues, the people would come, a bit like that movie about the baseball field.
And my last question, sorry, Chair, and it's probably too hard to give specifics, but where I couldn't find any where the audience comes from and where the drivers and maybe the competitors come from. Do you have any information around Auckland or the rest of the country? Or
No, I don't have accurate information. It would be only word of mouth. And I know that predominantly in the past the audience had come from West Auckland, but more recently the audience comes from what I consider to be generally all over Auckland. And also the competitors' base has moved away from West Auckland to more general, but certainly the drivers coming in from out of Auckland come up the southern motorway from Tauranga, from Napier. There's one team that comes from Napier each Saturday night that we run. There's people that come from Stratford each Saturday night we run, and there's one team that comes from the Kapiti Coast. So given that they have to, those people and many other people that live in South Auckland, the logistics of getting to the speedway, just to the speedway, would probably be eased by the move to Colindale Park. For the people that may have to travel further, it's not an extra half an hour from Western Springs to the Colindale Park area on the same motorway, provided that there's no traffic jams, as Danny alluded to.
thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Sure, have... Hi,
Where are you
over
hiding?
here.
Okay.
So have improvements to the track at Western Springs been considered to address some of the issues you've raised?
The track, no, I've not had that tabled because we're controlled at this stage by the size of the field at Ponsonby, and the width of the track is determined by the rugby field at Ponsonby versus the amount of room that we've got left to the new wall that was put in 1983-84.
Okay, fine.
Councillor Cooper.
So that means you can't make it longer?
We cannot make the track longer, no, because the perimeter wall is constrained.
Okay. Right. I think my questions was asked by someone else, but another question I had, I really acknowledge people that have been in this for decades, because I have friends and like the Fukuris and people that have been involved for many, many years. And so I acknowledge that history that you talked about.
Yes.
And I guess, like you say, it's in your heart and it's in your head.
Yes.
How have you reconciled that? Because you've got a long history and you've had the same and just as good experience as other people that are advocating for something differently here. How have you reconciled that for yourself? The ability to evolve with the sport and move forward while still acknowledging the past.
I'm not sure that I fully understand that, and I'll just try and answer it.
It's like for some people it's really hard.
Yeah.
Change for them is hard. For you, you've still had all the same history, the same great things happening, but you seem to be able to have the ability to move forward. How is it your change from a driver to actually being more hands-on in the whole sport that's helped that, to see, and the logistics that's made it different for you?
Yes. I just want to just say that the driving and becoming competitive and passionate about my sport has enhanced my life as such. I've adopted the same philosophy in my business, etc., etc. And because of my success in my sport and the adoption of those same rules as such has helped me be successful. I did, when I stopped racing at the Speedway, I did suffer a time of depression because at once I was in the spotlight, people hated me, but that was good too because at least they noticed me. I went through this stage where I was nothing, and then my involvement in the sport, I couldn't let the sport go, and so I was able to give back to the sport by doing what I do, which is my commentary thing. And believe it or not, once people learned that I wasn't such a bad bloke outside of a car, they began to like me again. So it was quite humorous actually. But yes, you're right. The change is difficult, and I believe that the change will be difficult for some people to move from Western Springs to Colindale Park. But, and having said that too, we've got to be positive about it, and we've got to look at the potential of the people from South Auckland, it being more accessible to them now, and also in conjunction with something that I hope I'm not talking out of turn here, that Western Springs is doing in conjunction with the Auckland Warriors, are trying to make some sort of connection between the two. So therefore, the bulk of the Warriors people come from South Auckland. If we can get them to coming to the Speedway, that would work. But just on a more comical note, what we really need is a couple of Tongan players so we can get all those Tongans along there to watch the Speedway. So.
Member Taipere.
Kia ora, Mr Chairman. Kia ora, Graham. I didn't quite get the answer before about you having any understanding about what it would cost to upgrade Western Springs. So was the answer you don't have any idea?
I had no idea what it costs to upgrade Western Springs, and you can upgrade the track, but I can't see that we've got the land there or the land is there to upgrade the logistics or the facilities that required to have.
Okay, because that's sort of my next question about, Councillor Cooper asked about length, but to me there was more than length in what you were saying. There was the rugby field, there was the wall, there was other things, but are they not able to be remedied?
Not in my opinion, not at great expense, no. It's
Oh, you don't know
certainly
the-
not the
well,
perimeter wall. Not
You don't
the
know the expense though?
No, I don't know the expense,
so-
but I do know that it cost a lot of money for you to put the wall in, and now if you want to tear it out and make the track bigger.
Wouldn't be the first time someone's done something like that.
Okay, yeah, I understand that.
yeah,
I don't know
well-
what the expense would be, but I don't think it's possible or viable.
So if it was cheaper to do that than move to Collindale, would you support that?
No, because it doesn't. I wouldn't support that because it doesn't cure the entire picture that I've painted, which is the logistics.
And the night.
The logistics.
The logistics of the transporters coming to Western Springs and where are we going to put them, and the parking facility that we need,
Okay, well,
etc.
I hear that. So the other aspect was there was information provided earlier about other stadiums or other racetracks had been relocated and the attendance was reduced significantly, what I heard. Are you aware of that, or?
Yes, I am aware of that, yes.
Do you believe it was because they shifted, or what?
Yes, I do in part. I do believe that, yes.
So why wouldn't you consider that as a risk for Collindale then?
It is a risk for Collindale, but given that the sport is constrained by the size of the facility at the moment, that I don't see any opportunity for the expansion of the sport, and I believe that the interest in the sport is there, that it can expand, but...
So I'm a little concerned.
Yep, I hear you.
You know, and I respect your experience.
Yeah.
And all that goes with it. Can I say this though?
Yep.
To say I don't know what it would cost, and then if it costs more, I would choose the one that costs more. And to say I hear stuff that was said today, which I agree with, around reduction in attendance numbers, which could be a significant implication on the racing, the fans and everybody, and particularly the drivers and all that goes with it. I'm a little bit lost because I would have hoped that you had more substantial stuff about why it had to be there when you still haven't got to the point of this, you know, being clear about Western Springs. You're clear about it because of the wall, the rugby field, and the length.
And
but
the
I
logistics.
haven't seen anything from what you said or anyone, you know, that it couldn't be fixed. So I just wanted to put that out to you, and feel free to answer in whatever way you like to that. But honestly, I'm really unsure. Okay, so
Sure.
Thank you.
So, as a follow-up question to that, supplementary then, can you just explain the full repercussions of the logistics moving big B trains in and out of Western Springs and where to park them, etc., and so on, the limitations there? Thank you.
Me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not a parking guy, and I'm not a truck driver or anything like that, but I do know that the sport has evolved to moving equipment for the race cars and spares, etc., to where these guys travel all around the country. And to do so comfortably, they need big semi-hauler trucks and trailers, etc. There's only one small road getting into Western Springs, and lots of, they're just not the space. They have to unload into the pits at Western Springs, and then park their cars out on that small road beside the Motat Museum. Then at the end of the night, they've got to somehow get all their equipment outside into those trucks that are parked far away, or they have to wait for their turn to come through the pits and pick up all their things. So from that perspective, that's very much a deterrent for the guys that are outside of Auckland against coming to Auckland along with the track and safety and etc. of it. So far as those things, the getting in and out of the pits is a real issue at Western Springs for loading or unloading and loading at the conclusion of the event. Yes, so that's why I consider a logistic issue.
Yep. Councillor Watson.
Hi, Graham.
Hi.
Thank you very much for all your information. It's certainly useful to hear from a man of your experience. I was just a little curious about the comments on Western Springs Speedway, because at the start of this year, Springs Promotion Limited put out this wonderful, lovely brochure about Western Springs, and I'd just be interested in your comment on a number of things that were said there. So in terms of the Speedway there, it was described as an iconic part of Auckland's summer family entertainment, affordable family-friendly entertainment. Speedway at Western Springs is the flagship speedway venue and is often regarded as the benchmark for all around the world. This is the start of this year. Attended by a strong and loyal fan base, increased audiences, set in a natural amphitheatre, the terrace seating provides up-close and unobstructed views of all this action. And that continues the theme throughout there, and it's very clear that Speedway at Western Springs is something special, and that's why Auckland Council had a record number of Speedway fans asking Council to remain at the Springs. So I'm just interested in your response to that, Graham.
Yes, I can't argue with that. It is an iconic track. It is talked about all around the world because of its location, but not because of the racing or the track's surface or the safety aspect of it, because of the narrowness of the track. We live stream to around the world, live stream while the racing's on at Western Springs, and I get questions coming back to me from the producer, from American audiences saying, how is it possible to race on a track that small and that narrow? So while, yes, it's been there all those years and it is iconic, it is due for expansion. It's due to go. It's outgrown its
It
place
says
there.
here, Graham, it's regarded as the benchmark for all around the world.
Yep.
The benchmark.
Okay. The track's certainly not the benchmark, in my opinion. Again,
Who said it was?
Well, Speedway said it was.
Okay, let's just keep it together, guys. We're doing well here. So are there any more questions? I have one more question. Graham, it just relates to, I'm really interested that you talked about the history and it's in everyone's mind, but you don't effectively have anything like a grandstand or, with a Hall of Fame and a museum or anything. Is that what you're alluding to, that would be a positive thing out at Colindale if a grandstand with associated buildings underneath? Is that where you're coming from? Because
yes, it is.
Because all we're proposing is to do underground works for all the motorsports at Colindale and then prepare for above track, but not stands or anything like that. Is that where you're referring to?
Yes, it is. Like Speedway's been at Western Springs since 1929, 30th of November 1929. And if you walk there today, there would be no memorabilia, and you walk through any of the buildings, there's nothing there that tells you that anything about the Speedway. In fact, if I go into the club rooms, etc., there's more about a rugby team or a rugby club that's been there since 1991 or 92 or something. There's an honours board there. There's all these things that pertain to the rugby club, but nothing about the Speedway. So what I'm saying is that people have collections of bits and pieces, but they're not accessible to anybody in the public. So if that was created at Colindale Park by the promotion, I believe that's in their proposed plan to do that, then that would be a huge thing from that perspective, and some of these relics could come out of hibernation as such and be enjoyed and for the people of Speedway. And Speedway is attended by a lot of people. And so it does deserve something like this, yes.
Could you do that at Western Springs?
Thank you. Are there any further questions of Graham? Wayne, really, just please. Any further questions?
Yep.
Yep.
Great idea about the memorabilia. Could you have that facility at Western Springs where it could tap into a huge market of people within the CBD and elsewhere?
Yes, I'm sure it could, but it's not the one and only thing that would be good. Yeah, the track needs to be. I keep saying it from a driver's perspective.
I'm just trying to get a handle on memorabilia.
Yep.
If you've got memorabilia,
if it was
about
on
Western
view,
Springs, wouldn't you want to?
Okay, Councillor Walker, I'm just going to cut you short there.
Sure,
Graham has been very open. He's been very consistent in talking about other things that are issues, tracks, whatever. Now you may disagree, but I'm sorry. That's what the presenter is saying, and we're not going to contradict that. So. Graham, thank you very much. We have a mover for Member Typery and a seconder, Councillor Watson, to thank you for your very good presentation. And so I'm going to put that. Councillors, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Graham.
See you at the Speedway, December the 1st.
Still at the Springs, you'll see us, Graham. Yeah.
Right. We will now go to